So today I'm thinking what we do is look over some more of the mission documentation from the documentation drive and think up some examples of things that might be interesting or difficult to tackle. And then from there, just cover how we might handle that in Blueprints, using the mission system, using Blueprints, or just covering basic ideas in Blueprints that y'all either need refreshers on or that just needs more detailing because of complexity or any other jazz like that. So I already opened up the level design document from the art drive. We can see here that the third mission after Chelsea's house, which we already looked over, as well as the hospital, which we already looked over a bit. We have mission 3, which looks to be a tutorial mission. Get that out of the way. And in the tutorial mission, it seems to be primarily a tutorial. You claim the plot of land, and the objectives are basically just moving forward the objectives as the player continues to build their base. There are multiple ways this could probably be tackled. One easy way this may be tackled is to just create a monitor function that is looking for a boolean to say that something has changed in a manner that we want. We don't want this function to run on the tick because that is bad for performance. I'll open this up to show you what I mean. And you're seeing everything right now, I'm assuming. Just making sure. Looks like it. So I'll still make this full
Yep.
screen. But now you can see the pop-up, so I'll keep it as a pop-up because that's how I normally operate. Now, for this tutorial, we will claim the plot of land and learn base claiming and mechanics for the basics for building a base. The player will be constructed to claim the area and call in for a Cersei trailer to be flown in and placed on the plot of land. Additional plots can be seen and claimed. The plots system has been deprecated, so this is a little bit outdated terminology, but we should be fine because that is quite similar to how things already function. If I drop in a character, playable character here, there's Winters, put her on top of the base, so she'll claim it right away. When we start play, she's a little high up. We also still have Mr. X here, so I'm going to go ahead and just get him out of here and clean up the references to him. If you remove a reference to something, it's in the code, and you just don't call the functions related to it, you should be fine, but it may be wise to just go into where that was being referenced. You see, I deleted Mr. X, so it's currently saying this is unknown. We're just going to go ahead and clear out this function so that we're not dealing with him. We don't have to worry about him at the moment. Up, see, there's the issue because it's waiting for move
Yep.
X, but that function is gone. We'll just clean that out because we're not going to worry about that. We're starting pretty fresh. In fact, let's not start completely fresh. Now, let's make sure that Winters is actually properly on there, because if you see it in lit mode, well, you can't see anything in lit mode because of the day-night system, but she was landing on top of the middle there where she couldn't move. So I placed her in a more appropriate position, and she claims the base. The base turns green. This would probably be the first objective. We would be waiting for the base to be claimed. Now, for situations like this, for tutorials where we're dealing with very meta... Hang on, I have a message.
One sec while you're checking that.
Oh, that's ready. There we go. Hello, Thad. Thad, you there? So why does it say I'm not typing? I'm not typing. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I had to one was eat dinner with the family and two go get water because apparently my city doesn't like telling people when there's E. coli in the
Oh, that's a bummer. Sorry about
yeah.
that.
All right, I'm back.
All right, hello again. Yeah, we just recently got started. You didn't miss much. I was just going over, just getting things started up as well as we started going over the mission document again, moving to the next mission, which seems to be a tutorial mission about building a base. So I was talking about launching in. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and mute the game here because we already have enough sounds going on. Let's see, there it is. So, if I drop Winters in on the base, she already claims it. You can tell because the lights are green that the base is claimed. And then what the tutorial will want us to do is press the build button over here, select buildings, build a Cersei trailer, pick wherever we want it, rotate it however we want, and that would be the end of the mission. And then from there, we could just build additional stuff and so forth. That's basically the scope of the mission so far. We would send Winters up here to claim the base. We would then construct a Cersei trailer. The way that would be done is we actually can track the values for the base volume in question because we would be claiming the base. I'm going to move Winters down. See, the base is not already claimed, so we'd have to move her up there to claim it. So how would we track that this mission gets completed? Well, we would have to know what to track. And in this case, it would be the base volume. Because we're messing with the base, that means we're messing with the base volume. And there are values for the base volume that let us know when it's claimed, when it's not claimed, and when it has a tent. And basically the Cersei trailer originally was a tent, at least in some phase, and therefore the boolean for tracking it is a tent, I believe, has tent. Let's see. I believe if it's not exposed as a variable that we can access it via function call. So I'm going to get a reference, like before, select the object, in this case the base volume, go to the blueprint, right click, and we can get a reference to it. Let's see, search tent, has tent, there it is. It has a function, has tent, for whether or not it has a Cersei trailer. The function name is a little outdated because the terminology was a bit outdated, but it still is searching for that Cersei trailer, and it will return true as soon as the player starts to construct the Cersei trailer and it's flying in on the chopper. The other thing we need to look for is when the base is activated. The base activates when the player claims it by walking up here. And I can tell y'all, when you claim the base, that a Boolean value called b is base turns to true. So I'm going to search for base, and because it is already because it is named base volume, it has a lot of stuff stored there. So there's the value we're looking for, is base. So this same base volume is base. Get is base. So all we would have to do is create a slight looping function that searches for whenever one of these things has changed, and then move to the next objective for the player in order to get this done. So how would we do that? Well, when the objective starts, let's go ahead and create an objective for this. We're going to make it a blueprint objective because we're watching for blueprint values. We're going to call activate base for the first objective and make the second objective also blueprint. I'm going to call it the second one build Cersei trailer. Pretty simple. We don't have an objective volume that we need anymore. So I'm going to clear that out. Rid of the volume. And for the second one, we don't need 3 objectives, so let's get rid of that objective. For the second objective, notice for the array, if you don't leave an empty pin inside your arrays, you can click on the array pin with a right click and hit remove array element pin. That way the array is nice and clean. It doesn't have an additional null element because that might cause some weirdness. And let's call this mission name start a base. For the mission name, we're going to keep the same example BP mission ID here, just so we don't have to change the IDs for in other locations. Now,
So
go ahead.
could you make multiple missions on the same blueprint, or do you
Yes.
want it to be
You could easily make multiple missions on the same blueprint,
copy paste it?
just as long as you make sure that they have a different ID. You could even have them have the same name, just as long as the ID is different.
Okay.
But yeah, for now we have this mission activate base. I'm going to move the minimap point onto the base itself for the first objective. So let's find the minimap point. There it is. Scoot it up here onto the base so the player knows to move to the base. In fact, I'm going to actually move it up here closer to the stairs so that the player knows to go up the stairs. Should be pretty clear. Now, when this mission is added, which is in the begin plane, we need to also add a tracking function for this. In the future, for certain functions like this, we may need to add delegates to make this a little bit more responsive. But as things stand, I don't think we're going to be having multiple missions where we're tracking whether or not the player has built or activated a base. So for now, we can just create in the blueprint a tracking function for seeing when the isBase variable becomes true and when the hasTent function returns true. So let's create that loop for activate base because that's the name of the event. So let's call loop for activate base. Loop for activate base. Actually, let's call it loop check for activate base. That way it's very clear what we're doing. Secondly, for the next one, we're going to base it on very similar logic, except we're going to be checking a function instead of a bool. So we're actually going to first define this function, then we're going to just duplicate it and swap out the var for the function, essentially. So we need to get a reference to the base volume because we're trying to monitor when this value becomes true. So let's get a reference to the base volume, just like we did in the event graph, and get the value is base. Get is base, and we just want to return this as true or false. So how do we do that? Well, functions can return values. If you click on the function, you'll see it has inputs and outputs. So this would be an output. So you click new parameter on output, and we have a boolean as the default parameter. So we're going to call this just is base because that's the value we're looking for. And hookup is base as the return value. And that's basically it. We just need to call this function on a loop, and it'll return what we need. But we also want that function to handle the looping for us instead of having the loop in the event graph because that would be a little messy. So we're going to change this up a little bit. Instead of simply returning is base, we're going to add a loop. We're going to create a branch here. And if the condition that we're looking for is base is true, then we'll simply return true. Like so. And if it is false, we'll start a timer to recall this function and look for it again. So at false, set timer by function name. And for the object in question, it's asking who is calling this function. In this case, we get a reference to self because it's this same blueprint that's calling this function. And we're looking for the exact same function name. So select the function, then single click on it again to change the name. But instead of changing it, just copy it, paste it in as the function name, and then we'll set a time interval of say 3 seconds. That way we're not bothering the player too much, but as soon as they start building something, they're going to get the feedback that they did it right. And here, we're not going to set it looping because when this function completes, it'll just keep going saying, is it a base yet? If it's not, try again. If it's a base, yes. Is it a base yet? It's not. Try again. Is it a base yet? It is a base. Return. And we're done. So that would be if we were to feed this function in and try to get a return value for it. Dragging the function is base. But we need to call this to start things off. So in order to do that, we'll actually just make another comment block over here. So add mission will go to the loop check for activate base. And in this case, we're actually not going to return is base. Now that I think about it, we're instead going to call a different function, player activated base, and call that here instead of simply returning true or false. So that as soon as the player has activated the base, they will then advance the mission. So, like before, when the player has activated the base, we're going to get access to the player controller. And here, I'm actually going to start doing what Robert did inside of the Chelsea's house by promoting the player controller to a variable, naming that variable PC, and then just using that. Because this is the begin play, we're always going to have access to PC because the begin play will succeed. And if the begin play doesn't succeed, we'll get this message that something went wrong. So we'll have access to PC. So when player activated the base, we'll simply get the PC, get the mission system, and we're not even going to give it convert to validated get because if it got by the begin play, then the mission system is valid. So we should be okay here to just do these two, and then say for the mission system, we want to set objective status, like before, and we get the ID of the mission in question, which is still example BP mission because we're changing it up, and objective ID 0, that's correct because that's the first objective here. Objective ID 0 also. Let's make sure, let's expand this out real quick to make sure that it doesn't have a timer. Timer value is still 0, so we're good. And this one is still inactive. This one is still active from the get-go, so we're all good. Just double check your settings if these are minimized to make sure that you didn't leave like a timer going or left one as unrequired or inactive or anything like that. So once the player has activated the base, we're simply going to say that this objective has completed. Pretty simple. And since that objective has completed, it'll call its event. And its event, custom event, will be the same name as the event on clear. So let's copy the event name here, activate base, and now we have our custom event that gets called when the player completes this objective. Now, note that this will also work if the player has already claimed the base, because all it is doing is checking if base volume is a base. So the very first run won't even use a timer if the player has already claimed the base. There's no need to check to see if the player has already done it, because that's what it's going to do. There's no special case for that. All it's doing is checking that bool. So for activate base, when that's completed, we then need to just set this objective to active. So we're actually just going to do the same thing here. Copy that over here to the event, but set the ID to 1, and then new status active, so that we're setting the objective at array element 1 to active instead of inactive, so we start tracking it. Let's also clear this out, just for cleanliness' sake. That does nothing to its functionality because it's the blueprint objective, but it looks cleaner. All I did was clear out the objective number and target ID from its former state as a kill enemies objective. And now that this objective is active, we need to build the trailer. And if you remember, to build the trailer, we simply have to check if a player has a tent. So, in order to do that, we're going to duplicate this loop check function. You can see here we already have all this good stuff. So we can go over here to the function on the left, duplicate, and right-click loop check for activate base, duplicate, and now loop check for has tent. We can also just call it loop check for has trailer, or has Circe, since that's more clear for the current terminology. So let's do that. And instead of is base, we're going to do has tent. And instead of just checking that var, we're just going to run that function and hook that into the branch. And instead of player activated base, we're going to duplicate that, player built Circe. And set objective status of objective 1 to success. And finally, loop check has Circe. You can see has tent broke because I lost the reference to the base volume. So let's grab that, because I tried to compile and therefore it was saying, hey, there's a problem. Great reference to the base volume, has tent. Boop. And next, because I removed that function call and duplicated its player built Circe, call it that here. And finally, I almost missed something. We were almost going to call loop check for activate base again, but we don't need that. We need loop check for has Circe. So let's change this timer, has Circe. And now, when the player has claimed the base, this is going to fire off activated base, which is going to tell the mission that this objective has completed. And with this objective, the first objective, activate base has completed, it's going to say activate the next objective. And the next objective will require for the player to build the Circe trailer, and we'll wait for a blueprint to say that it's done. In this case, we'll start the loop check for has Circe. After that, we go into that loop check here. It's just going to check has tent, and if it does have the tent, it's going to call player built Circe, which will mark this as success and complete the mission. And if the loop check says that the player has not built Circe, it'll do a timer and check again in 3 seconds. So now, this should actually be done. If I go in here and see here, start a base, activate the base. So I'm going to walk up here to the base, see if this works. And in 3 seconds, we should see build a Circe trailer. Yep, it was like, yep, you have the base now. So let's build the trailer. And there it is. That was pretty simple, wasn't it? So that's just an example of how you can just create a loop to check if a certain state has changed. And we set that timer value to 3 seconds there, just so it's not overwhelming the system. Because something that you may find in some earlier blueprints that we've done is the use of this function here, tick. What does this function do? Every single time a frame is rendered, this gets called.
Yeah.
And this can be useful for some things, for making really smooth movement, or for like UI, where we want things to be very, very responsive. This doesn't need to be responsive. As you saw, you go up to the base, you claim it, and the objective will roll over to the next one. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So for things like this, where you're making a monitor function, like loop check, do you have the Circe tent yet? No, check again in 3 seconds. If you were to do this on the tick, we would be running that Boolean check every frame, which is like 60 times a second. That is completely unnecessary. So be wary of using things inside the tick. If you put something in the tick, ask yourself, do I have a reason for this to run 60 times a second? And if the answer is no,
Be important.
If the answer is no, don't use the tick. But if you do have to use the tick, I might as well teach you a little bit about it. Delta seconds, what does that mean? This means the time since the last frame. Frame rates are not 100% consistent, as you are well aware, I'm guessing. And because of that, if the delta second, that's what this delta time is here for. If you run certain functionality, let's say, let's get Winters real quick. If you run certain functionality on Winters, move, let's say this set actor location, yeah, let's set her location in the tick to get actor location. But I'm showing you some vector math here as well. Like before, when we set actor location can be used to warp things around, and in most cases you want to set teleport to true, because otherwise the physics it'll act as if they actually moved that quickly to the new location. If you're like moving something gently along the ground, you can leave teleport off. It'll be as if it's actually scooting along the ground. Whereas if we turn teleport on, it is as if they teleported, and the physics won't go wonky if they moved a really far distance at the speed of light. So, for vector math, like I showed you before, when we had an integer value, like maybe just create an example integer. In fact, we have an integer here. So let's just get this integer, and like before, if you type in equals, you can get like a little equals value, or less than, or equals to something. There's a less than, or here's a less than, or here's a greater than, here's a greater than or equal to, for example. You can also do math in like addition, such as integer plus integer or integer minus integer. You can do times one other. You type in an asterisk to get multiplication, and you can do integer times integer. Lots of stuff like that. If you want floating point precision, which basically means if you want decimal points, don't use integers, you use floats instead. This for example is a float. It has the green color.
Yeah.
Integers have the teal color. And floats have the decimal points. You can see here wave duration starting value is 10.0. And for the integer, it's only 0.
Just 10.
If I put 0.5, it'll round out to 0 because it's an integer, it doesn't have decimal points. Whereas this,
Yeah, it's just whole numbers.
I can set it to 10.5 and it's fine. In fact, I can set it to something very, very precise, such as 3.
Yeah. 3-point pi.
Yes, it stores up. In this case, for Unreal, its floats store up to 6 points of decimal precision, which takes up more memory. Which is why if you don't need decimal places, just use an integer. It's more friendly for performance.
Yeah. Plus, also, who needs 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 exactly, right?
You'd be surprised when it comes to like setting actor rotations or messing with animations. But in this case, we're not doing that. We're simply doing vector math. What is a vector? In this case, vectors are a compilation of numbers. And in this case, for 3D space, such as location, a location vector is simply an x position float, a y position float, and a z position float. Again, I just hit recombine struct pin to make it back to a vector, or split to make it into an x, y, and z. And so let's say every tick, we wanted to move her 1 on the x direction. So I can drag this pin off, which is a float value, because I already split it. And then I want to make vector, and I can make a vector from floats. So instead of making, I want to keep the y and z, but I want to add to the x. So let's grab the x value and type in plus float, add 1 to the x value, and then plug that in instead of plugging the x in directly. And now we have a new vector. So we plug that into location, and every tick, Winters is now going to move 1 on the x-axis.
You gotta go to the moon, man.
So she's going to go to the moon. There she goes. Every single frame, she's moving 1 x forward on the x value. That's a little bit of simple math. Now, let's make it a little bit more complex. We're going to use delta time here in order to make it consistent because, let's see, stat frame, FPS, there we go.
Yeah, because like if you started lagging, she'd slow down.
If I started lagging, she'd slow down. You can see here I have a pretty solid 60 frames per second, so she has a pretty solid movement speed.
Yeah.
If stuff were to happen and things were to slow down, let's see if I can do that, by the way. Let's grab a box real quick. Cube. And then let's make this cube a little taller and a lot wider so that we have a wall that the infected are not going to pass. And then over here on this other side of the wall, we're going to drop in an infected, copy him, and then select his buddy, and copy them. And then type in infected up here, select all of them, copy, copy, and have basically a little army over here, to the point where we're going to have some serious frame rate problems by having more infected that the game is designed to handle.
Better hope they don't World War Z over it.
I still am close to 60 FPS, but it's starting to dip a little bit. So if we watch her
Yeah.
carefully, I'm going to go slow-mo here now, actually. And look at that. I'm in slow-mo right now. And you'll notice that she's still moving at the same rate as well. I hold the Alt key. Oh, it's it's ejecting because the Alt also does stuff inside the editor. But she's moving at the exact same rate when I hold Alt, when I don't hold Alt, and so forth. So that's another thing to note, is if the time scale changes, that stuff based on tick isn't going to care. If the player activates slow-mo or something, yeah.
Time Lord that shit.
Yeah, you can see here I am going in slow motion. She's still moving along the X direction at basically the same speed
Yeah.
as if I let go of slow motion. So that's another thing to note, and that's another reason to avoid the tick, if possible. But delta seconds is just time since last frame. And by using delta seconds, you can ensure consistency instead of making things bound to frame rate. A lot of earlier games you may have noticed, especially on PC, were tied to frame rate, and if you play like an older game on a more modern system, and that game does not cap its frame rate, or you manually uncap its frame rate, you'll suddenly notice everything's moving in fast forward.
Or if you look at the ground in Fallout 76.
We're going to ignore Fallout 76. So that's what delta seconds is for. It's to make things unbound by the frame rate. If you end up running things, if you need to run check every frame, delta seconds allows you to unbind it and actually bind the functions to the relative distances to time instead of to the frame rate. So if we were to add, instead of adding 1.0 here, we would add 1.0. We would take this float value here, because you can see it's a float because it's green, so float times float. Float times, let's see, 5. So the amount of time that has passed since the last frame times 5 plus x. We're going to have a considerably different result. So we're going to take the return x plus float, and that float value that we're going to add is going to be the delta time, in other words, time since last frame, times 5. You see here, it's starting to get a little crisscrossy, but it's still pretty understandable. In fact, I'm going to just do this to make it a little clearer. And that'll unbind it by the frame rate. So no matter how slow the frame rate moves, she's going to move at the same pace. You see here, that's even slower than before. But with stat FPS, even with my frame rate dipping up and down, she's not going to move faster or slower. And here's another benefit: if I go slow-mo, it actually respects slow-mo. Look at that.
Okay.
As opposed to tick. So if you have to use tick, that's what delta time is there for, is to make sure that things aren't only affected by your frame rate. Like Skyrim's physics, for example, is affected by frame rate, which is why when you have high physics, when you have a high frame rate, you sometimes see mammoths flying into the air. It's because the game isn't expecting you to
Yeah.
have a good frame rate.
Oh man, we didn't expect them to have good graphics cards.
Yeah. Well, then Skyrim is starting to show its age a little bit, but it's still a great game. Still. But that's an example of using a little bit of vector math. Now, I'm going to show you another one. This one is very important. Let's say, and I actually used this recently for making Fleet Logic. I have another message. It's something to worry about. Let's say we want to face something. Let's say we want Winters to turn and face something. So let's pick the tower. We want her to face the tower on command. How's that sound? Let's do that. So let's make a keybind, key V, just so we can at any time tell Winters to face the tower. Let's get rid of the tick because we're not using it. So how do we do that? Well, we deal with the rotator. Actors have basically 3 vectors defining their position in space. That is their location, which can be gotten by getActorLocation, their rotation, and their scale. GetActorScale 3D, basically, because we're in 3D space. Now, if you're wondering what these values are, you can just hit split struct, and you'll notice that here for the rotation, instead of it being just x, y, and z, we have roll, pitch, and yaw. If y'all are familiar with aviation, and I'm from a military family. My father was Air Force. He's retired now. Uh, you'll know that you'll understand these pretty intuitively. But roll basically is, imagine you're, let's get a 3D view of something. In fact, let's look at this guy. That'll help. Okay, notice here, oh, what happened to the camera? Okay, notice here, we have at the bottom left this axis here. We have an X, Y, and Z axis. Roll, X is the forward axis. So roll would be as if we were rolling around the X axis. We're doing a barrel roll, so to speak, if Peppy Hare were to guide us. Pitch is facing up and down. So if we're on the y-axis, we're looking up and down here. You see here, it's rotation around the y-axis is pitch, and yaw is rotation on the z-axis. In other words, looking up here and then rotating around like this. That's is yaw. So in 2D space, because this is an RTS, the only rotation we generally worry about is yaw, which is rotation around the z-axis, which means that if we rotate blue, that's changing the yaw. So we only want to change, in other words, the yaw value of their rotator if we want to change the direction they're facing. If we change the other ones, they're going to end up like pretending that they're on an angle that doesn't exist, which will look weird, like that. And that's just weird. So if we want her to face the tower, well, we need to know where the tower is. So we're going to get a reference to the tower. Like before, we select it, right-click, create a reference, and we're good. Then from there, we're going to set Winters to face it. How do we do that? The basic idea of making something face another object in vector math is you get their location and you subtract it from the target. Get actor location. This is the basic part, but it requires additional math beyond this. But vector, their location minus your location equals a direction vector, in short. But there's more math that needs to be done on this, and it can get kind of complex. So the easy way to do it, easy and foolproof way to do it, is Blueprint, because Blueprint actually already has a function for this. Find, look at, rotation. So instead of starting with the target, this function actually takes the person you want to look at something. So we need to take Winters and get their location, get actor location, like before, and plug that into the start and get the location of the target. And set that up. And now the find look at location will return a rotator that matches, that would grab her location and then face her to rotate exactly towards this. But if she's on an incline, let's say she was on top of a wall, let's get rid of all these infected. If she were to,
I overdid it
may have gotten too far in some places. So if she were like on an incline somewhere, let's say she was standing on top of something that moved her up, she would probably end up turning towards it and then facing down. And then for the rest of the game, she's going to be at this incline as she moves around because her yaw won't reset. So instead, like I said before, we only want to affect the yaw. So we're going to split the strut pin here. And this right here, get look at rotation to tower, is going to get her location, get the tower's location, and derive the rotator to face her towards that. Now we're going to get Winters' rotation, get actor rotation, and like before, we're going to split the struct pin, drag that value in, and make rotator, and hook in the roll and the pitch, but then hook in the yaw from this sucker. And then finally, to finish this up, let's expand the comment to match it. To finish this up, we'll then grab Winters one last time and set actor rotation. And we're going to not teleport physics, just to show you what that looks like, because her hair is probably going to bob around. Set again the new rotation, and now every time we press V, it's going to run this math to change her yaw to match whatever yaw she needs to look at the tower. So wherever she is, if I press V, she faces it. Move over here, press V. While I'm moving, press V. She's trying to correct it because she has other things that she's doing. but because she's trying to focus in a certain direction based on her last move, but every time I press V, she's going to instantly snap to the tower and then go back to whatever she was looking at, like before. And this can be pretty handy for a lot of things. It's just being able to manipulate rotation. And find look at rotation is your friend here. Like I use that quite a lot in, for example, vehicular AI for setting up a whole bunch of things, including doing mathematical comparisons. But those are a little bit beyond the scope of this right now. We're going to go for a little bit longer and then wrap, because I know Taro has to go in about 13 minutes. So we covered rotation, we covered some basic vector math, we covered an example of making a blueprint monitor function. So let's scroll down inside the game design document and see if there's something else. Hunt the special infected. Dr. Wu sees a special infected, so the objective is to go to a certain location, engage whatever infected they encounter before the spitter is encountered. So the objectives are explore, find the new infected, combat, type, collect samples. Okay. So what would we do here? It sounds like we need to find the spitter, defeat the spitter, collect the sample from the spitter. So let's set up a little mock-up of this. And we'll probably figure out animations of this. I should be able to do something pretty decent in 10 minutes. Let's take the mission objective that we have here. Let's clear out these functions, because we don't need them. Loop check for activate base. There we go. Get rid of these monitor functions that we made. Let's say find spitter. This is going to be reach location. So we're going to, like before, we're going to add a mission volume. Type in volume and find mission volume. There it is. It's going to say we're going to walk up here, and when we get there, we're going to take one of these spawn points that we left from before. Let's see, spawn for kill objective. Let's get rid of these functions because we are not using those anymore. Let's get rid of these spawn points and leave one. I'm going to spawn the spitter up here when the player touches this volume. So find spitter, and the second objective is going to be kill spitter. And then we're going to have a third objective, collect samples from spitter. So we're going to, for this one, it's not going to be blueprint. It's going to be kill enemies at the target ID 1, because we're going to spawn a new spitter. I'm going to give him a target ID of 1. We're going to kill one thing. And we don't need a minimap point for that right now. So pretty simple. Right now we're going to reach this volume that I just added. So let's click on that volume. I would categorize it, but I'm trying to rush a little bit so that I don't go over the hour limit. So we create a reference to this mission volume and hook it up to the objective volume here, so that when the player reaches this location, it'll complete the objective, find spitter. Add a custom event, find spitter. Was that the name of it? Let's double check by just copying this and pasting it in, because that should be exact. And then from there, we're going to get the PC. Get rid of some of these old matters. Let's see, find references. Where is this being used? Example reach objective. We're going to get rid of that. And then clear that out. Current wall, get rid of that. Look at me, pause, get rid of that. Just cleaning up some of the old stuff. And then when we find the spitter, we're going to get PC, get the mission system. And from the mission system, we're going to set objective status of the next one. Of the mission ID. Mission ID is example BP mission. Still. Objective ID will be 1. We're going to set this one to active, and it's going to be kill spitter. And next, we're going to want to spawn the spitter. Spawn spitter for example mission. So we'll hook up that function call here, and then define it. And for the spawn spitter, we're going to spawn active from class. We're going to select the BP spitter. There it is, BP NPC infected spitter. I'm going to get the spawn point, drop it in, get its transform, like before, hook it up to spawn transform. Collision handling, always spawn, because it's required for an objective, so always spawn. In fact, always spawn ignore collisions, and we'll just set the spawn point differently if there are collisions there. And that'll spawn him in. We're going to give him the ID, set target ID, set unit ID, that's it, set unit ID, that's it. And set it to 1, because that's the value that we set for the objective back here. There it is, the value, the objective, the target ID is 1, so we set the unit ID to 1. And next, once we spawn him as well, we're going to save a reference to him and call him the current spitter. So we're going to promote him to a variable. Actually, we're going to show you how to do delegates. So this fellow has a death delegate. All of our characters have death delegate. Bind event to death delegate. Pretty nifty. So what we're going to do is we're still going to promote him to a variable. And we're going to, once we promote him, actually, there's a simpler way to do that. We're going to make a custom event. Make a custom event, add a custom event, and we're going to call this event setup spitter death delegate. And I'll show you. And basically what a delegate does is it calls a certain bit of logic when that delegate fires. And we have a death delegate that fires off when something dies. So because of that, as soon as he dies, this event will spawn if we bind something to him. So, like with functions, events can have inputs. They can't have outputs, but they can have inputs. So we're going to add an input here for BD NPC infected spitter. And we're going to call this the spitter. So now we can feed a spitter into this event. I'm going to call we're going to call this event, which is setup spitter death delegate. Setup spitter, there it is. I'm going to feed in the spitter we spawn to this event. And then, now that we're in the event graph, we can bind stuff to events. So we're going to bind death delegate. Bind event to death delegate. And on this event, we're going to have we're going to create custom event, spitter killed, and when he dies, the actor that died will have his location, and that's where we're going to spawn that's where we're going to spawn an object that the player will have to collide with. That's where we're actually going to spawn a mission volume. Interesting. Let me think. Once he dies, the player will have to collect a sample from his body. Making sure that I'm not missing missions. Still no. Okay. So, when this happens, we're going to know the exact location of where he is when he dies. And we're going to want to tell the player to move there. So how do we do that? Quite simple. Let's see. We're going to create a new volume. A trigger volume. That's right. Let's see. Actually, yeah, that'll work, won't it? Let's take this mission volume that we already have. See, we have the mission volume. Let's copy it and paste it and call this one this mission volume that we have selected. Let's see. Oh,
Did it duplicate?
It didn't duplicate. Let's fix that. There we go. No? That's weird. Okay, let's just make a new one. It's fine. And let's make it pretty small. And we're going to call this the spitter mission volume, just to be clear on what it is. Spitter mission volume. And what we're going to do, why is all this popping up? Now, we're going to set this one to movable, because we're going to do an very old level design trick and hide it, where your player can't reach it. And when the spitter dies, we're going to get that location of where he died, with reference to the mission volume, and because we set it to movable, set actor location. We're going to set, not relative location, don't set relative location, that's entirely different, set actor location. There we go. Relative location is an entirely different thing, don't touch it unless you know what it is yet. You can mess around with it if you want. Definitely teleport, don't sweep. We're going to set this mission volume to there. When the spitter dies, we're going to have a third objective, which is another reach location objective. And boop. We're going to call it collect samples from spitter corpse. Actually, let's collect sample from corpse. So that's a little bit shorter. And it's going to be a reach location. And we're going to get the new volume that we just made, spitter mission volume. And because the mission volume is going to be moving, we're also going to want to attach a minimap point to it. So let's go into the base, go to missions, mission minimap point actor, grab that sucker, and then drag it onto the spitter volume to attach it. And let's see, let's set its location to 0, 0, 0, because that's its relative location. So now it has no offset from the mission volume, it is directly in the middle of that volume. So when the volume moves, so will the minimap point. And then we just create a reference to that point, attach it in, like we did with the other minimap point, set this to inactive, and when the spitter dies, we're going to get the PC and set the objective status of objective 2 to active. So the player will have to move in to collect samples from the corpse by touching that mission volume when the spitter dies. So if I'm correct, this should work. When we walk up here, spitter will spawn, we kill the spitter, a volume will appear, and then we walk up to that volume. I'm not seeing a minimap point. Let's see, because did I not hook up a minimap point to the... I'm still referencing this minimap point. So let's grab it and move it to the volume for where we want to spawn the spitter. There we go. Set up here. He will spawn. We'll kill him. There he is. He's a little tougher than a regular infected. Move a little bit because he's going to spit. There you go. He's dead. Click sample from corpse. And...
Yeah, kill spitter didn't get tracked.
Okay, that worked, but I didn't change the name of the new objective. Okay, let's see. Kill spitter didn't get tracked. Let's see. Okay, let's double check that then, because I may have messed up. Find the spitter. When I touch this volume, he should spawn. I should say kill spitter. There we go. A little bit, so I dodge the spit. Okay, click sample from corpse, and then kill spitter started again. So something weird is happening here. I messed up somewhere. See, we add the mission. When we find the spitter, we set objective status of 1 to active. And down here, we set objective status, objective ID 2 to active. There it is. It's a different objective, different mission volume. So something's happening here. Okay, set of spitter death delegate. Okay, spawn spitter for example mission. Set the ID. Spitter killed. That's when we get this volume and move it to his location. I'm missing something here somewhere.
Did we set the ID for kill spitter to be 1?
The objective ID is 2 because we're messing with this objective, but and the spitter himself, when we spawn him in, we set his ID to 1 for this. See, target ID 1, you need to kill one thing.
Ah, okay.
So that is correct. So let's see here. Let's make sure that these are lined up correctly. Okay, that is hooking up into 2. You can see here that it's not, I didn't mix up the locations. So let's do a little bit of debugging. Let's print that spitter spawned. And when spitter is killed, we'll say spitter killed. Because if something's going wrong, you just start debugging. If you can't see it yourself, get the blueprint to tell you what it's doing. Then once I get this done, see, find the spitter. So once we get there, we should see a print. Spitter spawned, so everything's working as normal so far. Okay, dodge a little bit. Okay, spitter killed, and then let's see. The mission restarts, but we still can collect a sample from corpse. So let's go over there. So the blueprint didn't seem to move, but let's see if the volume did. There you go. So the minimap point didn't move, but you saw that it added a new objective, but it didn't clear the previous one. So when the spitter dies, it's not picking up the kill spitter objective is not properly picking up. Aha! That's my bad. And in a different way. An entirely different way. If I go into NPC infected normal to their event graph, get rid of that because that's unused. I have all this death logic here for broadcasting when they die, and I didn't propagate that to the special infected. So if I open the full blueprint editor for the special infected and drop in this sucker, okay, all this stuff, update on kill, update on death, team 1, get all attached actors, destroy actor, okay. This should fix it. Because I forgot to, when I made the special infected classes, I didn't propagate the blueprint logic to it. So there we go, kill the spitter. Go ahead and take the hit. There it is. because I was already standing on him because he already got that close. So
Ah,
in order to test making sure that the volume is moving properly, I'm going to adjust this by going into the spawn spitter. Once I spawn him, I'm going to set health and then get his max health. Get max health times float 0.5. So get half of his max health and set his health to half of his max health, so he isn't nearly as tough. And then hook that in. This is very rough shot, but I'm trying to hurry because I'm already going over a little bit. Normally you would clean up the code a little bit, but you get the idea. So get in here. Spawn the spitter. He's gonna be easier to kill. There you go. He's dead. Click sample from corpse. If I go where he died, the objective should clear. But it's not. There you go. He died right about there-ish. So the minimap point is not moving properly. Why isn't the minimap point moving properly? Let's see. I attached it to the spitter mission volume, but instead of attaching it, because if the attachment stuff isn't working, let's detach it. There we go. So now it's detached. And we're going to just go in where we're moving the volume. We're going to get the minimap point actor and also set actor location on this. Set actor location. Because sometimes something's not going to work, but there's another way to tackle it. In this case, I'm just going to do the same thing that I did here. Instead of attaching it and expecting it to move with the volume, I'm just going to call to move the minimap point itself. So now this should work just fine. It's just a little bit of problem solving. There we go, he's dead. And the minimap point did not move at all. Why is that? Let's see. At the blueprint? Let's check the blueprint of this sucker. That could be why. Point of interest component. Let's see. Default scene route. It's movable. So that may be a problem that I just need to go into to fix the minimap point, but the rest of this works, as you see. The minimap point itself seems to be it seems to not be movable as things stand. But there's one final thing we can do. When we spawn the spitter, I added another function. So let's go ahead and clean this up a tiny bit. I added another function that is helpful for base characters. Add minimap POI component. And when we add that component here, you'll see details up here when we have this function highlighted. To select a custom icon, it'll go to the default icon if you don't set the custom icon. And let's see. I believe. Let's see. Creates a new component. Okay. I remember doing this before. Let's add a. See if that happens. See if that works. Add a minimap POI component to that sucker. So that when he spawns, he'll appear on the minimap. Okay, you can see him on the minimap, moving a little bit. There we go. So move up to where he died. Right there. So you can see on the minimap it's updating properly, but the world POI component is not updating properly. So it's close. I just need to do some fixing there, I suppose. But the underlying logic is working. I just need to work on the visuals for some stuff that wouldn't be your fault if that didn't work. If you just see stuff like that not working when everything says it should be, just tell me specifically what's going on or show me a screenshot. Because I'm going to go ahead and propagate this death logic to the other special infected and commit that. Because that's a oversight on my part. Don't open the Visual Studio class. But other than that, we're pretty much done. Unless y'all have questions you want to cover before we wrap. Because I would want to go ahead and close up for Taro's sake.
Right.
I think I'm good on questions.
Yeah, I'm good.
Sounds good.
So I guess, I mean, and I hope I don't, hold on, I gotta mute something about.
It's fine.
Music was running in the background. I understand what you're doing. So, I don't want to extend this if Tara has to basically run, but
I get you.
How, maybe I'm completely off base here, but if you were trying to apply this to, like, say, an example in the hospital, right?
All right.
What could I easily? I guess my question to you is like, could I easily look at this video and be like, oh, okay, this applies to this?
I imagine so, yes, because
Okay.
a lot of these ideas or something like I did not look at this document beforehand. I did not know that this was a main mission. I thought this was a side mission, so I didn't know we were going to be
Mhm.
dealing with that. And you saw that I was able to just engineer a way to do it by just using again some basic blueprint and mission functionality. And like I
Right.
covered here recently, I showed you that events can have inputs and functions can have inputs and outputs. Like if I were to make another function here, spawn a spitter for example mission. If I always wanted to spawn him at a specific spot instead of at this spawn point,
Mhm.
and let's say I wanted to spawn him slightly away from Winters, I could add an input here that is a vector and say spawn location. And when I call this function, I can pass in, let's see, where I can right click the function, find references, and there it is. I can then just like get Winters, for example, and spawn him right on top of her,
Right.
and like literally just drop him from the sky by like getting Winters and adding an offset. There, there's a lot of little things you can just do by if you just think about how to do it. You'd say, okay, I have a problem here. Let me break it down to the smallest possible point, and then work forward from there. And for functions that have inputs and outputs, like if I just got her location, that would cause them to spawn literally right on top of her. If I were to break the spawn transform, like split it, let's break the link, then split it, and then just change the spawn location to that. And that, instead of using a transform, I just split the struct bin and just passed in a location, which makes things a lot simpler instead of having to add in a rotation and a scale. But yeah, you can just input inputs. You can add an output to this function,
Okay. Cool.
and when you add an output to a function, you also have to add a return node. That's one more thing. So when I add an output, you need to add a return node so that'll return, and all possible ways that this function can terminate should have a return node. So if you had a branch, and the false one would also have to return, as would the true one, so to speak. Like no matter how much logic is in between, you just have to make sure that every possible way that the function can terminate ends in a return node if you have an output. Or I can't guarantee what's going to happen. It'll probably be fine. But another thing to note is when you call return as well, the function is going to stop running. So if you have a branch that does a check and you hit return there, it's going to end. Or you have a loop, for example. Remember I showed you loops yesterday, where it's going to loop through all elements of an array.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you call return at any point in that loop, like when you find something, that's just going to terminate the loop, which can save performance.
Right.
And like you saw, I added a event with an input here because I wanted to bind an event to a delegate, and events are only on the event graph. So that's why I set up custom events and passed the spitter from that function to the event, and then the event to the bind, and the bind to create another event. And this is an example of a delegate. Like our actors have delegates. See, here's death delegate, deselected delegate, grenade ammo change, near medical facility, near weapon market, selected. They have quite a few little delegates here. Though selected, near weapon, near med facility, grenade ammo change, deselected, and death. I'll be probably adding more delegates as time goes on because I only recently found out about them and they're this handy. It's that simple to use them. And as soon as he dies, he calls this event for you since we bound something to it. So that's one way to get like around monitor functions, because otherwise I would just be monitoring when he died, or relying solely on the blueprint function here to say when it happened. Does that make sense? But I wanted to get his location when he died, so that's why I did this in order to immediately get his location as he died, and
Mm-hmm.
while potentially avoiding any problems that might have occurred if he had like despawned after death or something. This would get around that because the moment he died, this would be called. But yeah, functions and stuff, they have inputs, they have outputs. That's how you use a delegate. Every now and then just look for a delegate, or if you think that you need a delegate for something, you can ask me to make it for you, because making delegates isn't too hard. Like a delegate for when a character finishes playing an animation or something. I don't know. Like if a character, like a delegate that is called when the character finishes throwing a grenade. There's lots of things I can just create delegates for if you need them.
Okay.
So don't forget that. And don't forget that sometimes things are not going to function. Sometimes it's Unreal, and sometimes in this case, like you saw the world POI component that it was appearing in the world wasn't moving, but the minimap point itself was at the correct point where he died. And when I moved Winters' minimap point over that one on the minimap, it succeeded. So while the minimap points are moving properly, the world POI components don't seem to be. and I need to figure out why that is. But that wasn't your fault. And before, like the kill enemies objective wasn't succeeding because the special infected didn't have this blueprint block in their event graph, and I just fixed that. So I'm actually going to commit that right now. But yeah, I don't think we need to go over anything else. If anyone wants to go ahead and wrap up and leave, we're good. And other than that, I'll just stick around for questions.
Yeah,
I don't.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't think I'll have any questions
All right,
for
good
now.
stuff. So if you want to head off, that's a-okay. I'll still keep recording until like I close up everyone's questions and stuff. So have a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. So anything else you need to ask? Like, and for this stuff as well, I'm imagining that at the Sunday meeting, we'll probably end up assigning some of these missions that are inside these design documents to y'all. And with this stuff that I've given you, you should be able to get like the basic skeletal structure for the missions online and functioning, even if it's just in a basic form. Like if you have it set, if the function says like Witcher should go over here and play an animation, you could create the skeletal function of that by just making it such that reach location, and you skip the play animation part if you don't know how to do it, and then just say hey, and then just leave a comment there. Because remember when I said you can press C to leave a comment? You can also just do that to leave comments saying, hey, don't know how to do an animation, so Derek, please add anim here. Something like that. And then when you're done making that stuff, you can just say, hey, I couldn't quite finish up some of these things. Here's the things I couldn't finish up. I left comments in the code. And one very quick way to help me with that is to put TBD. Derek, please fill anim. And because when I'm trying to finish up something up that I've done, and I knew that I have to go back and fix some stuff up later, I do Control F TBD. And that'll take me directly to this comment. And so you can leave comment. If you're doing an assignment here, don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to do every single thing 100% in that moment, because we do want it to be complete and not in need of any additional tweaking when we finish up the missions, when we complete the missions that are going to be assigned this week. But I'm pretty certain he's going to assign missions to y'all now that you know some of the basics of Blueprint. And for that, if you can get the skeletal structure of the Blueprint working, and then just leave notes saying, hey, here's a complex thing that I need you to do. I went ahead and just filled it out with a reach location for now. Then I can come in and change it out for a play animation, and when animation completes, then move to the next objective by swapping out the reach location for some blueprint logic. So don't feel overwhelmed. You can just come in and do the best you can, fill it out such that it plays like a mission, just not as polished, and leave comments where there's complex things that you need me to fill in, or need Robert to fill in. Like, Robert knows how the dialogue system works, and he has access to all the dialogue assets, so he'll probably handle any dialogue pop-ups and things like that, and
Right.
y'all can just handle the rest of it and get the structure online and make sure that it plays well with the level design and all that jazz, because you're level designers, and then we can go in and add the special fancy programming or dialogue jazz and all that stuff. Because
Okay.
we're collaborating
I'm
on
not
this
a
stuff.
level designer.
Yeah, like I didn't know if you got like I guess my only my follow up to that was like obviously you guys are available and like you're saying just if you have any questions if you can't find it online just drop it in your report section or
Yeah.
something.
And for a lot of these cases, you don't even need to search online. You could just search through existing blueprints and find like similar nodes or things like that. And remember that there's always like a lot of the times when I'm trying to mess with something, I'm like, it's like sometimes it's like not a character, it's some sort of variable or thing that I'm not seen before. I drag a pin off and I just like search through some words that sound right. Like if I was like trying to change the size of something, I'd be like searching for size, and I see draw size, that doesn't seem right. Let's see scale, and then let's see set mask scale, get actor scale. So set scale, there you go. You can just like search for keywords, and you can usually often find some sort of function related to it, whatever you're searching for. Because I know characters have like a capsule component, so if I search for capsule, I can see there's all the stuff related to their capsule, so I can get this capsule half height, or I can change the capsule size, things like that. So it's just like if you're wondering about something, just search for the keyword. And remember that for stuff that I've added in, I try to add in like little comments. And like in this stuff, for example, I left a lot of comments on the make mission objective or inside the mission string, inside the mission struct. I try to add little comments and stuff. So don't be afraid to just like look at stuff a little bit or search stuff a little bit, even inside the project before you go to Google or go to YouTube. And I do recommend searching on YouTube separate from Google because oftentimes Google won't return video results that are very easy to find on YouTube for getting tutorials on things. And with the basics of the blueprint stuff that I've covered here, I'm pretty certain y'all could easily make like the structure for these missions, and then like on like one day, and then we just go in and fill in the structure of those missions until it plays better and has all of the like the dialogue and the animations and like fancy sound effects that we may want to play, all that stuff. Make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So yeah, any other questions?
The blueprint.
I get you. So I think we're good then. Also,
Sorry,
you
I'm
may notice
laughing about what he said.
yeah, you may notice
Yeah.
that there's a lot of those groups that I've been making. You feel free to just leave the group when we're done, because I end up recreating it each time. And, like there's
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah.
So
We could
ju-
probably
just
make a group, right? And then that way you could just auto invite everybody, right? Or something.
potentially, but if someone like has said that they're gone, then I don't want to like hit invite everyone pin while they're and bother them while they are unable to respond. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I imagine though, like I could still just like look at the member list and invite that way. Like yeah, a member list, and then see if I were to. I should be able to just ring. Yeah, I would think I would just hit ring Taro here, and that would call him back in. But I don't want to do that because that would be rude. So yeah, I'll probably
Great
just like
column anyway.
no, I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, I think we're good then. Yeah, I'll wrap it here, and I'll report to Robert on the progress here, and I'll say that I think y'all are pretty much ready to just create some of the basics of the blueprints. And if you run into any walls or something, you can just leave comments in the code again. Just leave a comment that says TBD, and then whatever you need,
Right.
and then put it near whatever the problem is, or inside the function. Like if you had a problem inside a function, you'd leave the comment here instead. And
Yeah.
then you just, or if it's not TBD, if it's a specific hash, like say, like put my name in there or something. Just whatever you think is easy to search for, so that I can easily just Control F and find it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna commit this map here, because I did a little bit more complex stuff here with like a delegate and spawning an enemy, and moving a mission volume, which I'm going to check here one last time. Console commands again. Show volume. Now I can see the volumes. There's a couple of nifty console commands like show collision. I wouldn't recommend show collision very often because it's very performance taxing to display that. But show volumes is very handy for the mission volumes here. And by the way, for console commands, this is another idea. If you type in show here, you can see a whole bunch of stuff that you can show. And you just try different letters here in order to see some of the stuff that you can show. And like show volumes was an option. So that's one way to learn how to learn a couple of console commands. So when I go here, see he should spawn in. There he is. He's already there. So I'm going to go ahead and run a little bit from him in order to try to get some distance. And see, there you go. You see the volume properly moved there. So we can confirm that the minimap point is the world POI component is the problem, as well as but the volume itself is fine. You see, it moved completely properly. And remember one thing that I did here. This mission volume here is not set to movable, and the spitter's volume is. Sorry, volume. Spitter mission volume here is set to movable. If you're not going to move something, don't set it movable. But if you are going to move something and it's not moving, make sure that it is set to movable. Because for a lot of these cases, it'll just save a little bit of performance if something is not set to movable if you're not planning to move it. And this is just an old game design technique. It's just you put something where the player can't reach it if it needs to already be in the world, and then just move it when it's time to use it. So yeah, I wanted to cover that real quickly, but as you saw, when I did show volumes, the volume was moving 100% correct. It moved exactly to where the spitter died. So I'm going to commit this map for y'all to review. And
Alright.
that's about it. I think we're going to call it. Any last thoughts?
No, I'm good. I just wanted to ask those questions.
All right then. Have a good one, y'all.
See ya.